Before we hop into today's conversation with one of the best coaches in the sport of running, I want to tell you a quick note that today's podcast is brought to you by Final Surge. And over the next couple of weeks, we will be documenting and chronicling some of the top coaches in the country across professional, collegiate, and high school sports teams. And we're calling this Final Surge Sessions because whether you're a coach, athlete, or entire team, Final Surge is the one platform built specifically for runners. It lets coaches easily deliver workouts, track results, and analyze progress, all in one clean dashboard. It syncs seamlessly with your GPS watch, Garmin, Coros, Apple Watch, Strava, you name it. No more juggling apps to stay organized. Final Surge brings training plans, messaging, and attendance tracking, super cool, into one simple place, perfect for any high school, college, or professional team. If you're a high school or college coach listening, head to finalsurge.com/schools for discounted pricing, up to 35% off. And then for anyone else listening to this, you can get 20% off your first coaching package with code Running Effect 20, all capital Running Effect 20 at checkout. Smarter training starts with smarter tools, and Final Surge is where that begins. I hope you guys enjoy this conversation with one of the top coaches in the country.
There's always ways to do what you love and make a job out of it. Get creative, but as long as you're passionate about something, you can absolutely be successful about it. So follow what your passion is, and it'll work out. Just keep putting in the hard work, and eventually a door will open up, or an idea will come to you, and new doors open up all the time for us, just because we're putting ourselves out there.
That was Tim Surface, one of the founders of the company Final Surge, who is bringing together this coaching series. Tim himself is a coach and has an extensive background in the sport of running. He actually ran for the University of Tulsa, where he ran 30-35 in the 10K, 14 minutes something in the 5K. He went on to run 224 in the marathon, 109 in the half, and had a short stint as a professional triathlete before going to create and start Final Surge. Today's conversation, we dive into being a dad and a coach. His three boys are remarkably successful at the sport of running, including his 8th grader, who just ran 15-12 in the 5K on the grass, which I can't even comprehend. And then we go into his background in the sport, leading into his creation of this company, Final Surge, and the ways that they serve athletes and how they can serve you as well. I obviously am an entrepreneur, so I always love these conversations to hear the behind the scenes and the wisdom and the journey of what it takes to create a successful company, specifically in the space of running. And that is a lot of our conversation with Tim today. So if you're interested as a coach or an athlete about getting better at running, you'll get insight. But also on the other end, if you're an athlete or just someone in general who wants to find ways to be a quote unquote professional or entrepreneur or make money in the sport of running, Tim is a great guy to learn from, as he shares a lot of wisdom of how he's been able to carve out his own path and his own journey in the sport of running and be successful along the way in business. If you enjoy this one, give us a 5-star review. It takes 5 seconds, helps us out greatly. Hit the follow or subscribe button so you never miss another episode like this. And pass around the podcast. Word of mouth marketing is the easiest way in which we can grow. With all those notes aside, I hope you all enjoy this conversation with the one and only Tim Surface. Tim Surface, welcome to the Running Effect podcast, the man behind a lot of podcast episodes. You helped to bring together Project 259 2 years ago, and now we're in the midst of this coaching series that's brought together by your company, Final Surge. And you yourself are a coach, and you're the man behind the company. So I wanted to sit down with you and hear all about it. So welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
I actually ran a marathon 2 days ago, or 3 days. What's today? Today is Wednesday. 3 days ago, ran 3:14. So we're inching ever closer. I'm becoming less washed. I did that off of 20-mile weeks instead of 2 weeks of training. So
okay.
I'll give
a little better that way.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of running performances, your son, who's in 8th grade, I think just ran 15-12, if I'm not mistaken. Were you surprised by that?
I wasn't. Actually, I've had a lot of people ask me that exact same question. With how his training's going, I knew it was going to be a low 15-minute performance as long as the weather was good. I was surprised maybe with his overall finish at second place. I mean, when we were warming up on the course, I told him we were on the back half of the course, and I was like, if you can get here with the leaders, I want you to think that you can win this race, because you certainly could if you're there with them. So, but the time itself, not really. He ran 9:16 last year on the track, and that roughly converts to a sub 15 minute on the track if you're running a 5K. So I knew he had it in him. Yeah.
I feel like when you're running 15:12 for the 5K in 8th grade, you're definitely in, I would say, the prodigy conversation. What's it like parenting a prodigy, and how do you go about that in a way that I'm sure you're thinking long-term, big scale? You'd rather him win NCAA titles than middle school national titles. How do you go about that trajectory?
Honestly, we haven't really thought about that at all. I mean, it's Luke. He's our kid. He's a middle schooler. We try to keep him as much a middle schooler as he possibly can be. He's very humble. He didn't even get a phone until this summer when we were out in Flagstaff at a camp that we go to every single year. And so we got him a phone for the first time, and he's not on social media. So like all of that stuff, I don't think it's hit him or sunk in. And he's the kind of kid who, he doesn't even really care. I mean, it's one of those things, like when we're at the track, he does what he needs to do. When we're at the race, he does what he needs to do. But then as soon as that's over, man, he's just a kid again, and he doesn't really think about it. And I think there's something to that. I think, you can obsess about running too much, especially at that age and at the high school age. And he doesn't do that, and he hasn't started, and hopefully, it stays that way. So I haven't really thought about it at all like that.
And you help to coach him, or you're the only coach?
So Tom Schwartz, he's a very good friend of mine. I actually met him through Final Surge. He has coached all my kids. He's written the training for all of our kids. So my older son, Tyler, who runs for NC State now, I believe Tom started coaching Tyler when he was like 9 years old. And then I've gotten to know Tom very, very well over the last 9-10 years. We spent a lot of time together. So he writes all of the training for my boys. I found out very early on that being a coach and a parent is not a good thing. I want to be just the parent and the running buddy, training partner. So he does that, and then I'm kind of the coach on the ground. I do make adjustments at the last minute. If the weather's hot or if something pops up and we have to change something, I can do that. But for the high school team, I am the coach there. I write the training there. I'm the assistant coach. We do have a head coach, but my wife and I, we both coach. She typically runs with the girls. I run with the boys every single day, and we do write their training. Yeah.
Is that something you've had to navigate in the past, with your son at NC State when he was in high school? Like, how do you differentiate the dad hat from the coach hat?
Yeah. It did get tough at some point, and I had to kind of step back and say, listen, I'm the dad here. I need to support him regardless of what happens. You're going to have bad workouts. You're going to have good workouts. And, early on, I would be like, we would be at the track, and like, I'd be getting frustrated about something. I was like, this is ridiculous. This is not me being a dad. This is me being like a coach. So that's when I kind of said, I don't want to coach him anymore. I don't want to write the workouts. I just want to show up. And for us, it's a family thing. Our entire family has run. My wife and I, we actually met in high school on our cross country team. So we've been together forever. She ran in college with me at the University of Tulsa. So it's definitely a family thing. We do it for fun. I just don't think of it as that coach athlete relationship with my kids. They're my training partners. We enjoy running together. That's the quality time that we get. We've got our kids for such a short time. I was telling our team the other day, we were talking about our middle son. He's a junior this year, and it's like, we've only got him for another year and a half. We want to spend as much time with him as possible that we can, while he's in the house. And, that's kind of what we do. So we run together. That's our time together. Yeah.
That's awesome. Appreciate that perspective.
Yep.
For them as kids, did they gravitate towards running, or was it something? So for me, I started running at the age of 5, and I was definitely forced to, but then I realized I was really good at it. And then it was kind of like my parents wanted us to do cross country because they really liked the sport. Like, they thought it was like the wholesome sport their kids could be a part of, but it also worked where I saw I was good. And so I would have done it with or without their approval. Whereas other siblings in my family hated cross country and had long discussions with my parents, and they got out of it. For you, what was the balance where I'm sure you and your wife, it's the sport that brought you guys together. Yeah. You guys have kids. Was the conversation early on of like, we're going to try to get them in the sport? They have really good genes, or did the kids kind of naturally gravitate towards it?
They all kind of took a different path to get into the sport. So my oldest son growing up, he saw me, I was still very competitive when we moved to Raleigh back in 2005. And he was born in 2006. So he saw me racing all the time. That's when I was a professional Ironman for a little bit. So he saw me doing all the triathlons, the Ironman stuff. He would want to watch it on TV. So for him, it was kind of like, that's what he wanted to do. I mean, he played soccer as well, but he kind of knew, I want to run. And so we started him pretty early on. He was running Junior Olympics and AAU stuff when he was like, 6, 7 years old, just for fun. But in our middle son, he's our soccer player. So he dabbled in track and cross country, and he runs a little bit now in high school. But his main love is soccer, and that's what he does kind of year round. And with Luke, it's funny. We actually thought he was not going to be the athlete at all. Like, he had zero interest in athletics. We had signed him up for soccer, signed him up, put him in some races. I think one cross country race, and he just didn't catch on. So, how he got into it was his, I guess it was 5th grade at middle school. They have the mile at middle school, and the winner of the mile gets to represent the school. And in the, I think it's called First and Fitness. And both of his brothers had always won the mile at the school and represented that. And he ended up winning for his class. And then he actually came to me and he was like, I want to do really well at First and Fitness. I'd like to try to win that. So that's kind of where it started with him. And I just, we started training him a little bit. He did like 2 runs a week for that and did really well. And then it just kind of progressed from there. So, but yeah, honestly, like with him, we were totally fine that, he wasn't going to do a sport. He was going to kind of do his own thing. And that was fine with us. They're our kids. So, we'll support them regardless of what they choose. But, when he did decide to run, obviously we were super happy about it because we do love running. So, yeah.
With Luke specifically, was there a race or a moment where it went from, wow, I was so wrong, this kid is insane?
I mean, it was probably, I would say, maybe that 5th grade year, like after First and Fitness, he wanted to keep racing. And because I was coaching at a school, we have a lot of like home meets, and we can just enter kids unattached. And we started putting him in some of those high school home meets just for fun. And every single meet, he would drop like 15 to 20 seconds in the mile. And at the end of his 5th grade year, he had run, I think 5:12, 5:14, something like that. I know he had gone sub 5:15. And that's
why do we try at this sport, Tim?
So that's kind of when we're like, okay, yeah, I think there's something there. So, if he enjoys it, let's see how far we can take it. So, yeah.
Everyone in your family is involved with the sport in some capacity. It sounds like you and your wife, both coaches, both have backgrounds in the sport. Oldest son runs for NC State. The middle one plays soccer, but still has some involvement in running. And then the youngest is quite remarkable. Is dinner conversation all about, world championship results and VO2 max and double threshold, or do you guys mix it up?
It's not really. So, I'm the one who's into that. So, I'm always watching Worlds, and I've got it on TV all the time, and Diamond League and all that stuff. And I'm really into the VO2 max and the training. But yeah, not them. I mean, if something comes up at the dinner table, it's maybe something to happen in practice, with them and the other kids and an interaction or something, and we're like joking about practice, something like that. And whenever Tyler comes to visit, so luckily, NC State's about 35 minutes away from where we live. So we still see him on Sundays. He still comes to church with us if they don't have a commitment that day on Sundays. So, I love talking track and cross country with him and, what's going on with the team. But like with Luke, we don't talk much about it at all. It's just like, it's just a normal middle school day for him. So, yeah.
You are super knowledgeable at the sport. As you said there, you studied the sport. I'm sure people will become more aware of this as we talk about your company, Final Surge, and a lot of the different, training tools that are on the platform. One of them that I used way back in middle school was like the race predictor and the race calculator and all that sort of stuff. And I just geek out when I was supposed to be on Zoom watching my classes. I was putting in, what split do I have to come through in 200 meters for my workout? Was it hard at all for you, like for your oldest, to kind of pass him off, or even your youngest, like, a lot about the sport. And so if I went to you and said, hey, can you coach me? You'd probably coach me excellently and maybe just as good as anyone else could. Is that hard to maybe drop the pride a little bit and be like, I know I could do a really good job here, but maybe not the most prudent?
It wasn't when Tyler went to school, because I think our biggest concern was that he's just someplace where he loves, that, he's around people that are like-minded, that, he enjoys. And that was the biggest thing for us. So, it's for us, like, I think NC State is a fantastic program. And if you ask those kids, I mean, they absolutely love each other. And with the thing I like about their men's program is a lot of their recruits are local. They recruit locally, and three of the guys that he's with, or two of the guys that he was with in his freshman year, he had been competing against those guys since like junior Olympics, since they were like 8, 9 years old. So he knew these guys really well. So they're a really, really close knit team. And I think that was the most important thing for us. And he's had fantastic results so far. He redshirted his freshman year, but he got to run some unattached races. And in his first 5K on the track, I think he PR'd by 30 seconds. So,
wow.
They clearly know what they're doing there. And so that wasn't an issue at all. No.
I wanted to ask you, because I noticed at Festival Miles, and then I noticed this past weekend, your youngest son wears super shoes for races. What's the thought process behind this?
Well, I'm a bit of a super shoe geek. If you saw the back of my office here, there's racks and there's like tons and tons. I test everything. I've talked to enough coaches and I've seen enough research that shoes make a big difference, and they're different for everyone. So you have to find the right shoes that work for you. So kind of the fortunate thing for us and our family is all of the boys in our family wear size 9. I wear size 9. All 3 boys wear a size 9. So we're able to kind of share shoes amongst each other. So if I buy a pair and it doesn't work for me, I can give them to them and vice versa. But yeah, so those are the shoes that have been the fastest for him. Doing workouts on the track, and I was telling you right before this, we went out to Wake Med the week before the Adidas race. And, one of the things we wanted to do, not only get a workout and just get him familiar again with the course. I mean, he's raced there a lot, but we hadn't been there this year, is just test out to make sure, the shoes were going to work on the course. Like, is the course hard enough? Is the grass hard enough? And they did. So that's what he stuck with. So he's comfortable with that. Yeah.
So are you anti-spike then, or what's your perspective?
No, I'm not anti-spike. I mean, he's Luke wore spikes a couple times last year. I think he broke 4:30 in spikes one time last year. I just like the super shoes. I think you can recover still a little bit faster than them, even though the spikes, have the foam and everything. But I still think especially if you have multiple races, back-to-back days, or if you're at a track meet and you have a couple races, that's why we wear the shoes. And since they are, they're legal in high school and you can pretty much wear anything you want, that's why we've stuck with them. But obviously, as he gets older and he's running faster, we'll definitely probably transition to the spikes. I think there's definitely a time that you can be running where I think the spikes will be faster. But I think right now, for where he's at, also with how much he weighs, I think the difference between spikes and super shoes, how much force you can put into the ground, and how much you weigh also has an effect. So, we kind of take that into account too. So I think right now, he's comfortable in the shoes, and, we're going to stick with that.
I have to be careful with my verbiage here. If there's a shoe company out there that wants to give Final Surge a 7-figure check, skip this part of the episode. From your perspective, Tim, what's the again, it sounds, case by case, and I know this is true, depending on the athlete and their body type and how much they weigh, like shoes can be different for everyone. Yeah. So it's hard to blanketly say this is the best brand or this is the best shoe. But from your findings, what are some of the shoes you're most impressed by at the moment?
So Luke has recently been wearing the Puma Fast Star 3s. As they announced those, a couple months ago. Was it Boston Marathon?
I think so. Yeah.
It was when they kind of debuted them. They had all the research. Actually was last year when they debuted those, I think. But anyway, so those, as soon as they came out, I tried to grab a pair of those, and we got some, and we did some testing. He's also raced in. He likes the Vaporflies, both the 3s and the 4s. He hasn't used a 4 yet in the race, but he uses those in workouts. We were at Brooks PR this summer, and they gave him the Hyperion Elite 3s. His first 2 cross country races this year, he wore those and did very well. He broke 16 in his very first race at McAlpine, which is the former Foot Locker South course. I guess it's the Brooks Championship course now for the South. So yeah, I would say those 3. My middle son, he wears why am I blanking on these? Not the Vaporflies, the marathon shoe.
Alpha Flies.
Alpha Fly. Yeah, he wears the Alpha Fly 3s. And those were the ones like I raced in all the time, and I just given him an old pair of my Alpha Flies, and he loves how those feel. So that's what he races in. And he was at Wake Med. He ran one of the other races this past week, and he raced in those. So yeah.
Wow, Alpha Flies for cross is a bold take, I must say, because they're so big.
I actually saw a couple other kids wearing those. So in the top
5,
top 6 kids in the championship race, another kid had Alpha Flies on. Yeah.
Are there not a lot of turns there?
There are, but I think, it's such a downhill course. Like at the start, there's a big downhill. And then at the 2 mile mark, there's also another big downhill. Um, I think you can gain a lot of time if you're really bouncing down that hill. And I think, the Alpha Flies and some of those super shoes give you that bounce that you may not quite get in a pair of spikes. So yeah, that's kind of why we've used this.
Take me through your journey. You mentioned you ran for Tulsa. I know you've run a marathon in 2:24, 30, 35, I think, for the 10K, 109 for the half. You have a background in running. You mentioned kind of the Ironman years. Take me through, your start in the sport, kind of chronicling your way to transitioning out and starting a company that has direct involvement within running,
Sure. Yeah.
triathlon, etc.
So, yeah, my start in the sport was in middle school. I was a basketball, baseball player at the time, and didn't have anything to do spring that middle school because these other sports didn't start till later. And a bunch of my friends were going out for track, so I decided, let's just try it out. And that year, I broke the school record. I don't know, it was sub 5. It was probably 4:56, something like that. Was one of the very first miles I ran, and progressively got kind of better that year, and just thought, man, I love this sport. It's a lot of fun. I love the one-on-one competition. And then high school, that's really my high school coach, Jim Marshall from Jefferson City, Missouri. He's been one of the biggest influences on my entire life. And I tell my own high school kids that I coach now, is just like, you can get so much from your cross country team. That's where you learn, I don't know, responsibility. That's where you learn how to work with other people. That's where you just learn hard work, all sorts of stuff. And, I learned a lot of that from that high school cross country team. So we had a unique team. We weren't, I guess we were considered one of the top teams always in the state of Missouri in the 90s. This was, I was in high school from 90, 92, 96. I graduated in 96. But, we had never won state. So we were always close. They had gotten seconds and thirds and fourths. And my freshman year, I came on the team, and I was actually the number 1 runner that year as a freshman, and had been winning some races. And I ran into some injury issues, and that year we didn't even go to state as a team. We had one kid on the team that made it to state. And then sophomore year we got 4th. My junior year we got 2nd, and then my senior year we were undefeated state champions, and I think at one point we were ranked 6th in the country. Back then there was this thing called newspapers, and they would get delivered to your house. And USA Today, every other week, they would put national high school rankings for the teams and individuals. I'm not sure how they compiled this, but we were up to 6th place.
USA Today had something for high school cross country.
They did. Like there was a little section
Shocking.
in the sports that always had the cross country every other week. Yeah. So
Wow.
anyway, so yeah, that was my high school career. And like I said, I met my wife on my high school team. I was a sophomore. She was a freshman. We both went to the University of Tulsa. The connection there is my high school coach. He was actually roommates in college with the distance coach at the University of Tulsa at the time. And that's kind of how I had kind of gotten the connection and went to a visit and just loved it. So, and then in college, we were, again, I came on my freshman year. We weren't necessarily a distance team like the University of Tulsa is now. And so I was one of the top guys as a freshman. And then my senior year, the coaches left. They went to University of Kansas, and Coach Steve Goley came in. So, and he is still there today. So, and his son is actually the head coach now, and Goley Senior. He's actually the women's coach. My wife and I actually used to babysit Taylor, the son, who's now the coach there. So we've known them for a long time as well. So that's kind of fun. But yeah, so at I went to the University of Tulsa. Like you said, I ran 30:35 and 14:35 there. And we were, we ran against some of the greats, Arkansas. That's when John McDonald was there. And some of those guys. So we got to race them a lot, that kind of stuff. But was never good enough to quite make it to nationals. And lots and lots of injuries. I had a severe Achilles injury in college, and that cut a lot of my season short. But post collegiate, after we got married, we stayed in Tulsa, Oklahoma for a little bit. Got into everything but running. I was like, I don't want a runner's body anymore, and got into rock climbing and jiu-jitsu and kickboxing and you name it. And then finally we decided we're gonna get out of the Midwest, move to the East Coast, and we came out here to Raleigh, North Carolina. And at that time, I had just started to kind of get back into running a little bit. And, the first thing we did when we came out here, we found Umstead Park. And when we saw that, I was like, yeah, this is where we're going to move. This place is amazing. So there's just, miles and miles of trails and crushed gravel out here, if you're familiar with Umstead. So we moved here, and at that time I had kind of decided I want to get back into running. I'd like to do my first marathon. And, within the first week, I went to the local running store, met the owner there, and he put me in contact with some guys who had been training. They had been to the Olympic trials in the marathon, and they're currently training for the next one. They're like, let me put you in touch with these guys. Sounds like, you'd be a good fit. And that's kind of how it started. So at least for my marathon career. And they were some pretty hardcore guys running 120 to 130 miles a week. And with my Achilles injury, I could only run once a week. I couldn't do the double. So I found a way to do that kind of mileage off one run a week. Lots of 20-mile easy recovery runs, that kind of thing, getting the mileage in. But finally made it healthy to that first marathon. That was 2006, like you said, Chicago. That was my very first one ever. I ran the 2:24. Went in thinking, I was probably in 2:18 to maybe 2:16 shape. So I was like, I'm going to go through the half in 1:09 and just kind of crush it after that. And that happened. I went through the half in 1:09 exactly. And then, just being my first marathon, not knowing anything about, what it really takes. I just, the piano jumped on your back and just, got slower and slower the rest of the race. So, but that was actually my fastest marathon. I never ran that fast again. So, as many times as I tried to get back there. So yeah, then gosh, a couple of years later, that's when I kind of found the sport of triathlon. I was still training to maybe get back to my next marathon. And a couple of my buddies, they had contacted me to say, hey, we're going to do a triathlon. And at the time, my buddies and I, we would try to meet somewhere at least once a year, every other year, just go on kind of a trip and still get together. We were all kind of spread all over the country. And they're like, it'd be fun if we did a triathlon. We all met, and, that was kind of our get together for that year. So started training for the triathlon, and again, picked it up really quickly just with my background in endurance. The bike came very naturally. The issue was I had never swum competitively in my entire life. I mean, I could not swim for the life of me. I had really never had real swim lessons. So that first triathlon, I almost stopped during the swim, the very first one I did. So I stopped in the water, my heart rate was way over 200. And I was just like, what am I doing? So I had to just sit there, calm down, finish the swim. And then I got on the bike and just started flying past people and flew past people on the run. So I was like, man, this is amazing. So that's kind of where I got started with triathlon. As I got better, hired a coach, and I think in about 3 years, that's when I won my first amateur title. It was a half Ironman. I think it was Steelhead, Michigan is the one I won. And because of that, I was able to get my pro card in Ironman and got on the Timex multisport team in 2010 and competed with them for that. So, and I say all that background that's kind of also what led to Final Surge. I made a lot of contacts, through the running, through the professional Ironman stuff that I then kind of used to help get Final Surge out there once we started. But how it came about is I started coaching a buddy at church. He was a coach at a small private school here in North Carolina, and that's actually the school that I coach at now. And he knew I was a runner and a triathlete. And he's like, hey, I'd love for you to come out and just maybe help us if you have time. And I was like, sure, I'll come and help. So that's kind of how I got started. I was just an assistant coach for about 2 years with him. He left the school, and then some of the kids who I had worked with said, hey, they can't find a coach for the coming year. Would you consider coming back and coaching? And I was like, well, I'll help you this summer. I was like, I don't know if I can coach you guys, but I was like, if you can't find anyone, let me know if the school doesn't find anybody. And yeah, the school could not find anyone. So they reached back out, and I was like, okay, we'll give it a shot and we'll start coaching. So at that time, I did have a full-time job, and I couldn't be at practice every single day. So I needed a way to, get the workouts to the kids and kind of see how they completed it, see how they felt, communicate with them. So that's where the idea came from. There wasn't a lot out there at the time. So this was 2011, 2012. And the only other online, training log out there was Training Peaks. And they came from a cycling background, and, they're very, very data intensive and just kind of not what I was looking for. I wanted something a little bit easier to use and more running focused. So that's where the idea came from. My business partner and I, we've been working together for 20 plus years now. I met him in college. It was a nights and weekends thing for us. So we just started developing the platform. He and I, at the very beginning, we built everything. My background is MIS, and he's a CS guy. He actually dropped out of college. I think I was our sophomore year, and got hired back as an adjunct professor and taught one of my classes. So he's a tech genius. But yeah, so he and I built everything at the beginning, and in 2015, at the end of 2015, I believe we launched Final Surge officially for the web platform, and just kind of got the word out there. Again, use my contacts from my past running and triathlon experiences to kind of get it out to some coaches, let them start using it, and after that, it just started growing by word of mouth. So, but yeah, it came out of necessity, and it actually came out of high school coaching is when it kind of started. So
that's amazing. One of the things I want to cover with you that I always love talking to people like you about is, there are a vast majority of our listeners today who are younger aren't going to go to the Olympics and aren't going to be paid to run full time, but a lot of them have the desire to stay in the sport and be in some paid capacity. For me, I was definitely one of those kids. I was like, oh, I'm never, going to go to the Olympics. And then the podcast started to make some money. I was like, oh, wow, this could really turn into something full time. For you, it was a similar thing, like came out of a desire to create something that wasn't out there in the immediate moment. You created it yourself and then paved the path for it to be full time. What advice would you have for younger people out there who realize that they might not be able to be a professional athlete, but the fact that hey, there are avenues to stay involved in the sport if you want to, when your run is ultimately done?
Yeah, I actually talked at a camp about this one year. The same thing, because my dream was always to be a professional athlete, and I wanted to be a professional runner, and it just didn't happen for me. I got a small glimpse of it with the professional triathlon thing, but triathlon was not really my true love. It was running. But yes, because I stuck with it, because I still had a huge passion for it, and learned as much as I could about it, then it was an easy transition for me. It was like, what else do I love that I can combine with the sport of running? And I love programming. When I got to the University of Tulsa, this was early 2000s, late 90s. So the internet was just becoming a thing. And, we were just learning how to build web pages. Back then you opened up a notepad and you actually wrote HTML by hand. And I was super, super interested in that, super interested in technology and web technologies at the time. And that was a way I could just blend those passions and, do something where it didn't feel like a job. So my absolute favorite thing to do now is just get on, Zoom sessions with coaches every single day now. And, I'm either doing demos or I'm just answering questions or I'm taking their feedback about the platform. And we still get to talk just running. We talk shop a little bit, and then we talk about, how Final Surge can, make them more efficient and, what we can do to help them. But yeah, there's always ways to do what you love and make a job out of it. I mean, just, get creative. But as long as you're passionate about something, you can absolutely be successful about it. So, I would just say, follow what your passion is. And it'll work out. Just, keep putting in the hard work, and, eventually a door will open up, or, an idea will come to you, and, new doors open up all the time for us. Just because we're putting ourselves out there, we're making as many connections as we can. One of my goals when we first started Final Surge was to literally every single morning I would read through all the running news. So like the first hour of my morning would be, I would go to Let's Run. I would go to, all of the other websites that were out there at the time, and just find what are the coaches out there talking about. And I would, find some articles. I would hunt down the coach. I would go to their website, try to find their contact information. And then immediately I would reach out to all these coaches, and I'd try to send, at least 5 emails every single morning, and just kind of cold call, people I've never met before. And you would be surprised how many people just get back to you. This industry, everyone's very generous with their time, and, people love to help each other. And, luckily, they were helping me when I first started out, and, I try to give back as well and help others as much as I possibly can when they reach out. So, that's the advice I would have. Just, find your passion and stick with it. So,
what was the specific moment when this went from hobby to, wow, this can be my full-time job and this is really happening?
Yeah. I would say we were probably 5 or 6 years into it. And it just kept growing and growing. And then we picked up a couple of key coaches, and we had an opportunity to kind of sponsor a couple of pro teams. The very first pro team that we sponsored was Hoka NAZ Elite. Ben Rosario, he had reached out and we'd had some conversations. And actually, he was kind of starting NAZ Elite when we were kind of getting started too. Like, it just lined up perfectly. And then the other thing we found out as we started talking and we went to like a conference together, we raced against each other in high school. So he's from St. Louis and I was from Jefferson City, and he's like 2 years younger than me. And we crossed over at the state meet like 2 times. And actually we found our name in race results and stuff. So it was kind of a cool story. And now we're good friends. Yeah. And I spend time with him every year when we're out in the Flagstaff area during the summer. But I would say it was about 4 to 5 years in, and it was we just kept seeing the users sign up. We kept seeing the revenue growing. And then once we were actually able to hire like a full app development team, that's kind of when we knew, okay, yeah, now this is getting serious. Because until that point, we had kind of like a little bootstrap app, and we were still mainly web-based. And, everyone was going to the apps on their phones, and we're like, okay, we can't do this ourselves. There's no way we can efficiently do this and learn this new technology. So we were making enough money at the time that we could actually hire a team of developers. So we did that, and then it's just kind of continued to take off from there. So now we're 12 years into this, and we've got 10 total employees, and it's a full-time job. 2 of those are contract workers, and everyone else it's full-time for. So
amazing. What feature do you feel like, or features throughout the years, because you guys are constantly adding and developing the platform and making it better and better, what feature or features do you feel like are on the platform present day that you look at and you're like, wow, this is a special thing, this is really unique?
Oh gosh.
Because for those who haven't used Final Surge, it's so much more nuanced than just you see the workout your coach has. Like, anyone who uses Final Surge knows there's a lot more to it.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I don't think there's one specific feature. I mean, it's evolved so much from when I was writing the code with my business partner. One of the very first features we use is I don't even think anyone uses it anymore because it's in our older platform and we're transitioning to a newer one now. But it was recording your splits manually. So, I didn't, this was back before, GPS watches were really that popular. So typically I was still working out. I had my Timex watch at the track, and, I was taking all my splits, and I wanted to go back and record every single one. And so we made a feature that you could put, what the distance was and what the exact time was down to the 100th of a second. Cause I geeked out on that kind of stuff. And I remember building that, and then now just seeing all of the integrations we have. It's just crazy that, we used to have to kind of beg companies to integrate with us. We would have to go to them, and I would have to send email after email and just get them to try to respond to me so we could do like an integration, with companies like Garmin's and Chorus's and all the different, wearables that are out there now. And now today the companies are reaching out to us. It's like they want to be part of Final Surge. They want their device to be connected to Final Surge. And that's kind of what I find amazing, that, it's gone from, how, I was kind of begging, like, please, can we integrate with you? And now, it's kind of turned around a little bit. And now, they want to integrate with us. So, I don't know. It's just stuff like that. I don't know that there's one specific feature that I'm just like, that's pretty cool, or that's amazing that we've done that. But as you said, we do new features all the time. Our core business is adults who coach other adults. So even though we have tons of high schools, tons of colleges, pro teams, it's really kind of our bread and butter is, you're an adult and you're coaching someone who's training for the Boston Marathon, or you own a coaching company, you've got a couple of other coaches who are training other adults. But one of the features that we just recently built, and it was kind of tailored for high schoolers, is attendance tracking. So now, if you have a large high school team, in your app, you can take attendance, and, there's different ways. We've got GPS location attendance. So if the high schooler is within a 50-meter radius of where you're going to meet for practice, they can do an auto check-in, or, they have a little barcode on there, on the app that the coach can then scan to very quickly check people in, or they can do it manually. So just stuff like that. I would have never thought, 10, 12 years ago that we would be doing stuff like that. So it's just come a long way. Yeah, it's kind of fun to see where we've gone.
Speak to the person that thinks an email is sufficient enough to send training Monday through Saturday compared to what Final Surge offers.
I mean, you'd be surprised how many coaches I get on with, and they're still doing it that way. They're using Google Docs and they're using email. I mean, it's an effective way to communicate. Is it efficient, and is it a great use of your time? I think it can be done better, and that's kind of where Final Surge came from. But I don't want to. I'm not going to knock anyone who still uses email or uses kind of some old school methods. I totally understand. I'm a very old school person too. I had someone. We had a former person we were working with that said, nobody uses email anymore, and everything has to be done on Slack. And well, I've run this entire company out of email, and I still do. Like I'm in email all day long. I kind of built a company out of just emailing people. So I love email. So I don't want to knock that, but yeah, it's just it saves a lot of time. It saves so much time, and especially if you're an in-person coach like me. I mean, you want to spend the least amount of time you can planning. And maybe doing that kind of communication where I want to be at the track. I want to be face to face with these kids or these adults, and that's where I prefer to spend my time. So, what we're doing is just trying to make everything super efficient, make it easy for you to go back and see, what you had your athletes do 1, 2, 3 seasons ago. And I think that's where, if you're just using email or something like that, that's where it gets really hard. If you need to go back and find older workouts and see what they did, see what the splits were, see what the workout was itself. That's where I think we really do a good job, and we can just, very quickly, find that season, find that workout, find the exact times they hit if you want to replicate that, or if you want to make an adjustment to it and use it again in a future session. So yeah, that's what I would say. If I'm going to pitch Final Surge to somebody who's still using some of those old school methods, I mean, it just saves you so much time. Just not only looking at your history, but then planning future stuff just with how you can copy and paste and reuse workouts. So, yeah.
And I'm assuming you'd say as well, like specifically if you do have a high school or college team, or you're a coach out there who has a business and you got 20 plus athletes, to have it all in one ecosystem and a few clicks away, you can change athletes, is way different than when I'm trying to find emails or Google Docs and you're like, okay, what's the keyword that I used in this so that I can find?
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's kind of the whole point of Final Surge is keep everything in one place. So even for our adult coaches, we've integrated a coaching business section now. So these coaches, they can run their monthly subscriptions out of Final Surge. So they're not using like a third party site or platform to do all that. So all of their accounting is within Final Surge, and we've got all the reports they can export and, for that. So that's kind of, that's kind of where we hope the system goes, is that it's just the kind of the all-in-one platform, and you never have to use a third party for anything else. And we're still working on that, and we're always going to be working on that. And there's still things that myself that I have to use as a third party platform that I don't want to, that we're currently trying to put into Final Surge. So one of our current features is we're doing a group chat. It's like a team chat, like a live chat, like you would. I don't know what, like WhatsApp, something like that. So that's something that's missing, because right now we have to use a third party chat for that, because we don't have a live chat in Final Surge. And I know that would make coaches' lives so much easier if they could just use that instead of using like 2 or 3 different disconnected apps. So yeah.
What would you say is the hardest part of owning a business, scaling a business, specifically in the running industry?
Gosh, well, number one, and I say this all the time because I am a runner, and runners are cheap. They don't like to pay for stuff. That was a hurdle at the very beginning. Just making the value proposition that and we didn't cost quite as much when we first launched. I think it was $25 a month, and now we're $39 a month, which is still very, very inexpensive compared to some of our competitors. But that was the first hurdle, just getting some coaches to realize it's worth the money. And especially if you're charging athletes, if you're an adult coach and you're charging an athlete, $100 a month, $150 a month, $39 is nothing to be able to coach these athletes and use the platform. But some of the other hurdles, it's just, it's a very tight knit industry. So, I think, and I don't know if this is a hurdle, but I mean, you have to make sure you put yourself in the place to get known in the industry, because, once you know people, they're going to introduce you to their friends, And then you kind of, everyone knows everyone. So now I can go to a running conference like the running event, and I know who most of these people are, and we can have conversations, and it just makes it a lot more fun. So even like when you and I saw each other at Festival of Miles and Brooks PR, we started working with Sound Running a couple months before Brooks PR, and Jesse at Sound Running, he's the original founder of Brooks PR. So, I got to hang out with him when we were there, and just getting to see you at some of those meets. So, yeah, again, I don't know that it's a hurdle, but I mean, you got to make sure to put yourself out there. And I'm not a very outgoing person at all. Like my wife will tell you, I prefer to just kind of stay out of the spotlight. And, if we're at group gatherings, I typically don't talk that much, but if you get me in front of a group of runners, that's kind of when I come to life, and I can talk running all day. So that's kind of the environment I love to be in. So, just make sure you love what you're doing and love the environment you're in. And then, it should be fairly easy to be successful.
What's the end goal with it? What would you want to accomplish with it before passing on the torch, selling it, passing it on to one of the kids? What does that look like?
I mean, the conversation comes up every once in a while, but it's just like, we love what we're doing. We love the lifestyle that it gives us. It allows me to coach. It allows me to spend time with my kids and my wife. And thankfully, it's in a place now that, the company, I won't say it runs itself, but, within our team of 10 people, everyone on our team, works very hard, and they do a very good job. So I don't have to be here every single day anymore. When we first started out, I made a ton of sacrifices. Lots and lots of sacrifices. I missed a lot of stuff with the kids, missed a lot of stuff with the family. And, there's some things I missed that I regret. So I'm very happy that we're not in that sort of growth phase anymore, and we're a little bit more mature. But, again, we don't have any there's not like a final goal that we're trying to do. We're just trying to keep improving. And, the crazy thing about being in the tech space, especially the sports technology space, man, things change so fast. And now even with AI, every single day, there's something new that's coming out. There's a new technology, there's a new device. So it's never boring. And we honestly never know where we're going to be, 1 year to another, because again, this space is changing just so rapidly. So it's hard to make like really concrete plans, because, it gets flipped on its head all the time. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, we I don't have any specific end goals right now. All I know is I love what we do. I love what I'm doing. I love the role I'm in. So I want to do that as long as I possibly can.
It's the way to win, is you're focused on the present moment. If you were like, oh yeah, I'm going to sell it in a year, and that's all I've been focused on. I find the people who love what they do every day are the ones who are ultimately successful, because it's very hard not to be successful when you enjoy your day-to-day work, because you'll just naturally do it. I've also kind of come across this insight recently, which is just like, the best people in the world don't view sacrifices as sacrifices. Like, to be on a podcast with you right now, I'm not sacrificing other things. Some people might think it that way. Whereas I'm like, oh, this is the best use of 12:47 p.m. on a Wednesday that I could be doing. So it's like, of course, it's going to be a more successful product. Speak to an athlete and speak to a coach who's interested in your platform. What's the most logical conclusion for both? If someone's an athlete, whether it's a training plan or simply just using the training calculator, or if it's a coach who has a team, like, what are the two most logical avenues they can go down with Final Surge today?
Yeah. So for athletes, there's two different things. So most of our athletes have a coach, and that's kind of how they find the platform. Their coach invites them, and that's how they're going to communicate with their coach, especially if they're not seeing that coach in person. That's how they're going to communicate with the coach, get their feedback to the coach. But an athlete that doesn't have a coach, number one, they can come and use Final Surge absolutely for free. We don't charge athletes to use the platform. None of our core training features are blocked off for athletes. But we do sell training plans, and Final Surge doesn't create these plans, but any coach that has a coaching account on Final Surge can put training plans on our platform. So, we've got thousands of coaches. You can search through thousands of plans and, narrow that down on our website and find the plan that works for you. So, and most of those plans also now include structured workouts. So if you're the type of athlete that you love to have the workout on your watch, and you like Garmin or Apple or Corals to kind of walk you through that workout, you can find that training plan in our marketplace, apply it to your Final Surge calendar, and those workouts are on your watch. So, I think those are kind of the key things for an athlete. And again, just keeping them organized. And, I know athletes like to go back and, look at training themselves. They like to go back a year, go back 2 years, see where they were at, where they've come from. So, we just make it easy to do that. From a coaching perspective, again, it's the ease of use, it's the organization, it's the communication. It's nice to have all of that communication in one place, regardless of if you're sending a workout comment that's attached to a workout, or it's a mailbox message. Maybe, we have an internal mailbox in our platform where I can blast a message out to every single athlete on my high school team if I need to get something out to them real quick. It's nice to just have it, again, all right there. I'm not searching through emails, anything like that. And then, I've been using, Final Surge now, since I started building it. So I've got 12 years of like history, not only of my own history, because I've connected my own Garmin, but of, all of my former athletes, all of my kids, and just be able to go back and like look at that all the time. Even now with Luke, the way he's running, I'll go back and I'll see, what was Tyler doing, when he was like a junior and he was running about the same times. What workouts was Tom planning for him then? And, how does that compare? I love doing stuff like that. And I think that helps as well. So, just as a coach, again, it's like everything's right there. You can communicate with multiple athletes very easily. And, again, with the planning, it makes it easy because we have individual calendars and we have team calendars. So if I'm a coach of a high school team, I can launch a team calendar and put the training just on that one calendar, and then all of my kids can see it. And if I need to go into an individual athlete and individualize one of those team workouts, you can do that too. So it makes it easy to, regardless of how you coach, hopefully it's flexible enough and it's customized enough that, you can tailor it to fit your needs. And yeah, you had asked me earlier, what's one of the features that I really love about the platform. And, now that we've had this conversation, it came back to me, and it was one of the very first features we've ever built. It's simply customizing your workout type. So like under run, we've got all of these subtypes, and a couple come default with the platform, but then you can go in and you can create your own subtype. So if you don't use the word threshold and you like to call it T, you can make a subtype of T or whatever you want. And then you can also color code that. So that way the terminology that I'm using in practice when I'm talking to the kids is the exact same terminology, they're going to see in the app when they're looking at what the upcoming workouts are. So that's a very, very simple feature, but it's one of my favorite, and it's very powerful, I think. So
it's amazing. Well, I've left a link in the show notes for anyone who wants to go check it out. And I have a discount code in there as well for anyone who's interested. Tim, final question for you. You geek out on running all the time. What's one or two training insights you've come across recently that would be beneficial to the listener, you think?
Training insights, gosh. Well, number one, and I hammer this into our high school team all the time. Get nutrition in as soon as you finish that workout. I mean, it's such a simple thing. And so many, like, especially high school kids, they're coming from after school and they forget to pack stuff. I mean, you have to make that part of your routine, pack something with protein and carbs. I mean, there's a ton of recovery drinks on the market and recovery foods, but, you don't have to spend a lot of money. It can be, simple. Like, we use Cliff Bars a lot, after a run, we'll eat a Cliff Bar, we have some recovery drinks we use. I think that makes one of the biggest differences, but also taking advantage of the shoe technology that's out there. Like with Luke, he's young enough and he's only been running for about 3 years now. I don't think he's ever run in a shoe that doesn't have the new foam in it, like a Pebax based foam. So, he runs in super shoes for workouts with the plate, but then on all of his other runs, we're in something like the Pegasus Plus that just has the Pebax foam, something like that. That has changed the game, I think, for running. And if you're talking about like mileage, what used to be 30 miles is now you can probably run 50 miles. And, what used to be 40 miles, you might be able to run 60 miles just because of those foams, because you feel so much better. And, I think a lot of coaches maybe miss that who's not still competitive, or maybe who hasn't had a chance, they're older and, maybe their knees are shot and they don't run anymore and they didn't have a chance to kind of run in the new shoes and run in the super shoes. I think that's one of the benefits of being a coach who is still somewhat competitive and still works out, is like you can see that for yourself and you can see how much of a difference it makes. So absolutely, do that for your kids, because it does make a huge difference. So, yeah.
Tim, final question for you. The question I ask every guest on every single episode: if you had Gordon Ramsay coming over to your house for dinner, what would you choose to make for him?
Well, I've never watched that show myself. I do know who he is.
I'm waiting
um,
for one of the days, and this has never happened, but there are some specific guests, you not being one of them, that I think in the back of my head, I have no clue if this person will know who Gordon Ramsay is. And to
okay.
date, there's not once been someone who's said who's Gordon Ramsay. So I've
Yeah,
lucked out.
and I should have had an answer prepared because I've listened to enough of your podcast that I know you asked that. I didn't know you would ask me today, but um, gosh, I don't cook much, but I don't know. I would say, I don't know, homemade pizzas. I guess we make
Oh,
we
okay.
make a lot of homemade pizza here. It's simple. We don't make the dough or anything. We buy the pre-made doughs, but then we'll make everything else. So yeah, we'll go with that. Just simple pepperoni and cheese pizza. That's what we're going with.
Should be good enough for Gordon. Tim, thank you so much for your time, for the support of the podcast, for Final Surge and the ways that it's been beneficial to me and other athletes I know. And it was great to sit down and talk and learn from you.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. Thanks, Dominic.